Titus Welliver, congratulations on the recently aired third season of Bosch. Now in the third season, you guys are really getting into that groove that long-running series get into after a while, where everything's starting to gel. So what was the attitude like going into the third season from you and everybody involved?
Well, we to quote Mike Connolly, in this season we really kind of took Harry Bosch down to the studs. He has sort of taken some steps on his own, and it's somewhat compromised his moral compass a bit. And so we knew we were going to be diving into that, and made for some really interesting stuff to play.
We'll talk a little bit more about that. I mean, you dive deeper into the, I guess, darker side of Bosch in a sense. But, I mean, is he always trying to do the right thing, even though his motives might be a bit dubious? I mean, even though his actions might be dubious?
Yes. I mean, here's a guy who has a really sort of, for lack of a better word, a flawless moral compass. And what occurs is that he has been pursuing a serial killer who's been murdering women and has not been able to gather enough evidence so that the district attorney will file charges. And so he takes measures which are that are illegal. He puts surveillance cameras inside of the man's apartment and outside of his apartment, and he's kind of keeping tabs on him. And this is completely illegal. It's in the service of right in the long run, but in the process of that, he observes a couple of guys pulling up to this character Gunn's apartment, and it's pretty clear what their intention is, and he makes a decision in that moment to turn and look the other way. And that sets things in motion, because the guy shows up. He's been dropped from the balcony of his apartment. He's dead, and the suspicion that light is shining upon Harry. And of course, he can't tell anyone that he's done this, and so it sort of places him at odds with himself and all the people around him that he trusts.
So I'm curious, you've been playing this role now for 3 seasons. What new, aside from what we just talked about, I wonder what new dimensions have you discovered in him, in playing him for all this time?
Well, the interesting thing about the character of Bosch is that he's a guy who there's a sameness to him. He doesn't necessarily, he's evolved as a human being as much as he's probably going to evolve, but his evolution now takes on this place of how he navigates people and situations, rather than being one who's reflective upon his deeds to a certain degree. And I find that the situations that we place him in are, in that regard, as an actor, there is an evolution, because we're sort of, since we don't follow the books chronologically, we are telling Harry's story in a kind of real time. And that presents its own set of challenges for me, but also it allows me to sort of bring some things to the character that might not necessarily be on the page.
Speaking of the books, I mean, it's a very popular series. Had you read the books before you took on the role, or do you look to the books at all, I guess, for added insight into the character?
Well, I had only read one Bosch novel many years before I received the pilot script for the series, and it resonated with me at the time, but it had been, as I said, many years before. When I was cast in the role, I went to Connolly and asked him which were the best books, because we were moving sort of on the fast track, which were the best books that I could read to kind of, beyond the script, get into who the character was. And he suggested that I read the books that we used for the first season, which was, oh my goodness, Echo Park, City of Bones, which was really the central story, and The Concrete Blonde. And there was an immediate kind of understanding of who this guy was. But that being said, of course, understanding and then sort of implementing that understanding and making it actable are two very sort of different parts of the process. Since then, of course, I read the book several times that we choose each season. I started recording the audiobooks 3 books ago. So in the latest, Wrong Side of Goodbye, Harry is retired, though Harry Bosch will never really retire. He's 62 years old. He's no longer in LAPD. He's working as a private eye, but also he's working as an auxiliary detective for the San Fernando Police Department. So he just kind of keeps going. I find occasionally, too, that I will just grab one of the books off the shelf randomly and read it. And there's a lot of very interesting stuff, nuance-wise, that I can kind of borrow for, for the show. And sometimes there's some great dialogue that Harry will have in the books that I'll run to them and say, hey, this is a fantastic line. Can we yank this? Because since we don't follow it chronologically, and the books then have to be kind of reconfigured to fit the universe of Bosch rather than, servicing the stories or the books in a linear fashion.
And TV too, it takes this sort of novelistic approach to its storytelling, in that you can explore stories long form and go off in different subplots that maybe you couldn't necessarily do in films. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the writers, they reconfigure the books and then they add some spices of their own. I mean, I said recently to someone that if we ran out of books tomorrow, that now in our 3rd season, we've kind of hit our stride. We really know who Harry is, not just the Harry of the books, but the Harry that we have in this universe on the show. So if we ran out of books, he's established enough now, and the writers have such a strong connection and sense of who he is, that we could take him, in completely new and original places.
Are there ways that that the Harry Bosch of the television show differentiates from the Harry Bosch of the novels?
Well, there's certainly the age difference. I mean, he originally in the books, he's a tunnel rat who served in Vietnam. I'm a bit shy on the age side to have served in Vietnam, so we had to sort of update his service to the first Gulf War, and then he re-enlists after 9/11 and goes and fights in Afghanistan. One of the things that for me as an actor that was important was the essence of who Harry Bosch is, that we stay, not stray, true to who he is in the books, and I think we've done a good job of that. I mean, of course, when you have the narrative in a book, the audience gets to sort of be in Harry's mind, whereas in a lot of that is that it's narrative. There's no dialogue, and yet that was something that for me was really kind of integral, because it's such a part of who Harry is. He's not monosyllabic, but he is a character of few words. So when he speaks, it resonates. So you do find those moments on the show where we find him alone and there is no dialogue, and he's being contemplative, or he's in a state of observation. And, normally, particularly within the parameters or framework of network television, you would, the temptation would be to give him a voiceover narration or attach some dialogue to his inner thoughts, and we don't do that, which is for me is rather enjoyable. I'm sure not a lot of actors actors like to talk, whereas a lot of times I'll say I don't think it's necessary for him to say anything here.
It's a very difficult thing getting the voice of a novel onto a TV or a movie screen, and doing it visually is always the best way. Um, I wonder, in addition to the books, if you did any other kind of research to prepare to play the part, to get inside the mode of thinking like a police investigator.
Well, I played police officers in other films and television shows in the past. But because Harry's an LAPD detective, I spent time and talked with our technical advisors who are active homicide detectives in the LAPD. I went and did an exercise, and it's a training exercise with a simulator, and it's a lethal force test in which scenarios are projected on a screen, and you have a interactive light weapon, and the scenarios are sometimes not what they appear to be. I mean, you do a traffic stop and somebody reaches for what could possibly be a weapon, but it's split-second timing because it's a cell phone. So it's they call it the shoot don't shoot simulator, and I had the opportunity to do that, and I have to say that in itself very much sort of prepared me for that sort of sense of adrenaline. Even though it's an exercise, it's like playing a video game. I'm surrounded by real detectives, and of course one wants to do well and win the day, and so I felt a lot of pressure performing, but also, to stand in the shoes of an officer in that way, it really gave me a very good insight into that response time, particularly in the use of lethal force. And it resonated because in the first season, we're dealing with a case where Harry's in a civil case where he's being sued for a wrongful death, and in fact is a good shooting. So that was very helpful.
And what does the LA setting add to the show?
Well, it's, LA, as much as Bosch is a character, LA is a character. I mean, it's the world that he lives in, and it's it speaks to his, his name, him being Hieronymus Bosch. It's the beautiful facade that Hollywood, presents of glitz and glamour and the beautiful life and the beautiful people. And yet that where Harry sort of lives, lurks, inhabits is the dark, seedy, unpleasant places. So there is that paradox, which is interesting.
And you're surrounded by so many great actors on the show. I actually got to talk to one of them, Lance Reddick, the other day. Can you talk a bit about how you guys work together as a group, as an ensemble?
Yeah, it feels to me unlike, and I've worked, to name a few, Deadwood and Sons of Anarchy. I've worked in other shows for Bochco and Milch, NYPD Blue, Brooklyn South, in these great ensemble settings. This one, in a way, feels almost theatrical, meaning rooted in theater at times. Some of the actors I've worked with before, but we really are, we're an ensemble in the truest sense of the word. A lot of times, we don't rehearse or anything like that. We kind of run and gun. Everybody kind of comes in prepared, and we shoot things, and we all have relationships together outside of work. But it's one of those situations that just worked out really, really well. Everyone gets along very well. A lot of us are kind of come from the New York theater, so there's a kind of like-mindedness in the approach to the work. And it's as a work environment, it's fantastic. We do have a very small period of time where we can kind of spitball ideas off of each other before we shoot, but we have such a confidence, trust level that we usually just kind of jump in and do it. And I think that can be an anomaly sometimes in this business.
You mentioned Bochco and Milch, and those are two people who really helped change TV storytelling, and you've been a part of a lot of great TV shows that helped pave the way for this renaissance that we see now in television. Can you talk about the ways in which that's changed just in the time that you've been working?
Well, I mean, I think that Bochco was really the sort of guy who changed it all. Hill Street Blues came out, and if you think about the size of that cast, and also the multitude of great actors that kind of came and went on that show, and then it was kind of taken to the next level with NYPD Blue. And I think for many years, that because it changed the whole playing field of that dynamic of having a really well-serviced ensemble group of actors, it raised the bar. And so it was sort of imitated and reconfigured. And then that seemed to sort of peter off a little bit for a while. And we sort of saw shows that there was less emphasis on an ensemble cast and sort of a central character who kind of pinballed off of situations. And it seems that there has been kind of a resurgence, for lack of a better word, to that. And I think that's good, because that, I think, is probably, one of the most difficult forms. I mean, as a writer myself, to have a large span of characters, and everyone has their favorite, but you know who each character is. And that's something that we've really focused on with Bosch, is that everyone's very well serviced. They all kind of get to evolve character-wise. This season particularly played very strongly for Jamie Hector's character, J. Edgar. We got to know him a bit more. And last season it was Lance Reddick's character, and that's good storytelling.
Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on another wonderful season of Bosch. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.